The town square of Crestwood, Ohio, was ablaze with whispers, the kind that cut deeper than any knife. I stood there, 25 years old, my boots scuffed against the cobblestones, as Mayor Harold Grayson's voice boomed from the podium, branding me the shame of the city. My crime? Loving who I loved, unapologetically, in a town that worshipped tradition like a god. My name is Eli Carver, and I'd never been one to bow. Growing up in Crestwood, where every street corner had a church and every diner a gossip, I learned early that being gay meant wearing armor. Not the kind you see, but the kind you build inside, grit and defiance stitched together to keep you standing. That morning, as the mayor's words echoed, I felt the weight of every eye on me. The crowd, a mix of neighbors I'd known since childhood and strangers who'd come for the spectacle, stared with a mix of pity and scorn. I didn't flinch. I'd been called worse than shame before. But then I saw him, Elliot Grayson, the mayor's son, standing at the edge of the crowd. His blonde hair caught the sunlight, and his blue eyes, usually so steady, flickered with something I couldn't name. Guilt? Fear? Or something deeper? At 27, Elliot was Crestwood's golden boy, the heir to his father's legacy, destined for a life of pressed suits and perfect smiles. We'd been friends once, back when we were kids racing bikes down Maple Street, before the world taught us to hide parts of ourselves. Now he was a stranger, or so I thought. The rally was the mayor's crusade, a public denouncement of moral decay after I'd been outed. It started with a photo, grainy but unmistakable, of me kissing a guy outside the old theater on Pine Avenue. Someone had sent it to the local paper, and by sunrise, it was plastered across every newsstand in town. The mayor, ever the opportunist, turned it into a campaign to cleanse Crestwood. I was the scapegoat, the cautionary tale. But what nobody knew, not the mayor, not the crowd, not even my own heart yet, was that Elliot Grayson, the man standing silently behind his father, was already unraveling my world in ways I couldn't imagine. I met Elliot again that night, not by chance but by necessity. The park near my apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like it's holding its breath. I sat on a bench, my leather jacket creaking as I leaned back, staring at the stars. I wasn't running, never would, but I needed air, space to think. That's when I heard footsteps, soft but deliberate, and turned to see Elliot standing there, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. "Eli," he said, his voice low, like he was afraid the trees might snitch. I didn't know he'd go this far. I laughed, sharp and bitter. "Your dad's been waiting for an excuse to crucify me, Elliot. You think I'm surprised?" He flinched, and I hated how it made my chest ache. "I'm not him," he said, stepping closer. His eyes locked on mine, and for a moment, I saw the boy I used to know. The one who'd sneak me extra cookies from his mom's kitchen, who'd laugh so hard he'd cry when we'd prank the neighbors. But that boy was gone, buried under years of expectations and a last name that weighed a ton. "Then why are you here?" I asked, standing up, my voice harder than I meant it to be. "To apologize? To save your conscience?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he pulled a notebook from his pocket, the kind he always carried to sketch or jot down ideas. He opened it, and there, in his messy handwriting, was a single sentence. "I can't stop thinking about you." My breath caught and the world tilted. I looked up, searching his face for a lie, but all I saw was truth. Raw, terrified, and undeniable. "Eli, I'm sorry," he whispered, "for everything, for staying quiet, for letting him." He stopped, his voice breaking. "I don't know how to do this." "Do what?" I pressed, my heart hammering. I stepped closer, close enough to feel the heat of him, to smell the faint cedar of his cologne. He swallowed hard, his eyes never leaving mine. Be honest. Be me. And then, before I could process it, he kissed me. It wasn't like the photo that had ruined my life, quick and stolen in a dark alley. This was desperate, electric, like he'd been holding it back for years. My hands found his shirt, gripping the fabric as if letting go would make him disappear. The park, the town, the mayor's words, they all faded. For that moment, it was just us, two people who'd been running from themselves and somehow collided. When we pulled apart, panting, reality crashed back. Elliot, I said, my voice rough. Your dad will kill you. This town will eat you alive. I know, he said, his jaw tight. But I'm done hiding. I wanted to believe him. God, I did. But Crestwood wasn't kind to people like us, and the mayor wasn't just a man. He was a machine, fueled by power and prejudice. I'd learned to survive by keeping my head down. But Elliot? He was stepping into a war he wasn't ready for. The next morning, I woke to a new headline. Mayor's son spotted with disgraced local. The photo was blurry, taken from a distance, but it was us in the park. Someone had been watching. My stomach dropped. Elliot wasn't just risking his reputation, he was risking everything. And yet, when I saw him later that day, outside the library where I worked part-time, he didn't look scared. He looked alive. We need to talk, he said, his voice steady despite the storm brewing around us. Not here. Somewhere safe. I nodded, my mind racing. Crestwood was a minefield now, and every step we took together was a dare. But as I looked at him, at the fire in his eyes, I knew I'd follow him anywhere. Even if it meant facing the mayor, the town, and every demon we'd both been running from. We found refuge in the old lighthouse on the edge of Crestwood, a crumbling relic by Lake Erie that nobody visited anymore. The air inside smelled of salt and neglect, and the wooden stairs creaked under our weight. Elliot led the way, his flashlight cutting through the dark as we climbed to the top. The view was breathtaking, waves crashing against the rocks, the horizon glowing orange as the sun dipped low. But I wasn't here for the view. I was here for him. Eli, I'm serious, Elliot said, setting the flashlight on the rusted railing. I'm done pretending. I've been lying to myself for years, and I can't. He stopped, running a hand through his hair. I can't keep doing it. I leaned against the wall, my arms crossed, trying to keep my heart from racing out of my chest. You say that now, but what happens when your dad finds out? When the whole town turns on you? You're not like me, Elliot. You've got a life to lose. His laugh was sharp, almost bitter. A life? You mean the one where I smile for cameras and shake hands with people who'd hate me if they knew the truth? That's not a life, Eli. That's a cage. I wanted to argue, to tell him he was naive, that Crestwood's hatred was a beast that didn't care about his last name. But the way he looked at me, eyes wide, vulnerable, like he was begging me to understand, stopped me cold. I'd spent years building walls, but Elliot was tearing them down with every word. Tell me something, I said, stepping closer. Why now? Why me? He didn't hesitate. Because you're the only person who's ever made me feel like I could be myself. Even when we were kids, you never cared about what anyone thought. You were free. And I've been chasing that feeling ever since. His words hit me like a punch. I'd spent so long fighting to survive that I'd forgotten what it felt like to be seen. Not as a scandal, not as a target, but as me. I reached for him, my hand brushing his cheek, and he leaned into it like he'd been starving for touch. We kissed again, slower this time, the kind of kiss that felt like a promise. But promises in Crestwood were dangerous. The next few days were a blur of stolen moments. We met in secret at the lighthouse in the woods behind my apartment, once in the back of his car parked on a dirt road outside town. Each time, I felt the world shift, like we were rewriting the rules of a place that wanted us broken. But the town wasn't sleeping. Whispers grew louder, and the headlines got uglier. Mayor's son in scandalous affair, screamed one front page with another grainy photo of us, this time outside the lighthouse. Someone was following us, and they weren't subtle. I confronted Elliot at the library, where I was shelving books to avoid the stares of coworkers. "This is getting out of hand," I said, keeping my voice low. "Your dad's going to do more than just yell at rallies if he finds out it's you." Elliot's jaw tightened. He already suspects. Last night he cornered me, asked why I was slumming it with you. I didn't deny it. My heart stopped. "You what?" "I'm not ashamed of this, Eli. I'm not ashamed of you." He grabbed my hand, his grip firm. "I told him I care about you." He didn't take it well. I could imagine the scene. Mayor Grayson's face red with rage, his voice thundering through their pristine mansion on Oak Hill. Elliot was playing with fire, and I wasn't sure I could protect him from the burns. But before I could say anything, my coworker, Sarah, poked her head around the corner, her eyes wide. "Eli, you need to see this," she said, holding out her phone. It was a live stream of the mayor at another rally, this time outside City Hall. His words were venom. "We will not let deviance corrupt our youth. This town will stand united against those who defy our values." The camera panned to the crowd, and there, on a handmade sign, were the words, "Eli Carver, leave Crestwood." My stomach churned. But worse was the look on Elliot's face. Pale, furious, like he was ready to storm the stage and burn it all down. "Don't," I said, grabbing his arm. "You go out there now, you're done. He'll destroy you." "He's already destroying you," Elliot shot back. "And I'm not going to stand by and let it happen." I didn't know how to tell him that I was used to it, that I'd been fighting this fight alone for years. Instead, I pulled him into the back room, away from prying eyes, and kissed him until the world felt a little less heavy. But even as we stood there, tangled in each other, I knew this was only the beginning. Crestwood was closing in, and the mayor wasn't the only one watching. The air in Crestwood grew thicker, like the town itself was holding its breath, waiting for us to break. I started noticing shadows, cars lingering too long outside my apartment, figures ducking out of sight when I turned. Someone spray-painted "freak" on my mailbox one night, the red letters dripping like blood. I scrubbed it off before dawn, but the words stayed with me, heavy as a bruise. Elliot was changing, too. The polished son of Crestwood was unraveling, his calm exterior cracking under the weight of his father's crusade. We met at the lighthouse again, the only place that felt like ours. He was pacing, his hands clenched into fists. "He's planning something," he said, his voice tight. "I overheard him talking to his campaign manager. They're digging into your past, Eli. Anything they can use to run you out of town." I laughed, though it felt hollow. "They won't find much. I'm a librarian with a GED and a rap sheet for jaywalking. What's he gonna do? Expose my overdue fines?" Elliot didn't smile. "He's not playing games, Eli. He's got money, connections. He's talking about lawsuits, maybe worse." I sat on the cold floor, my back against the wall, and looked up at him. "Then why are you still here? You could walk away, Elliot. Go back to being the perfect son. Nobody would know." He stopped pacing and knelt in front of me, his hands on my knees. "Because I love you," he said, the words raw and certain. "And I'm not letting him take that away." I froze. Love. It wasn't a word I'd let myself think about. Not with him. Not with anyone. Love was a luxury I couldn't afford in a town like this. But hearing it from Elliot, seeing the way his eyes burned with it, I felt something shift inside me. I pulled him close, my lips crashing into his, and for a moment, the world was just us. Two people fighting for something bigger than Crestwood's hate. But reality doesn't let you hide for long. The next day, I was called into the library director's office. Mrs. Callahan, a kind woman who'd always treated me like family, looked like she hadn't slept in days. "Eli," she said, her voice heavy, "the board's getting pressure. Parents, donors, they want you gone. I fought for you," but she slid a letter across the desk. It was a formal warning. Shape up or lose my job. I didn't tell Elliot right away. He had enough to carry, and I wasn't sure how much more he could take. But that night, when we met in the woods, he knew something was wrong. "Talk to me," he said, his hand brushing mine. "Don't shut me out." I told him everything, the letter, the paint, the feeling of being hunted. His face darkened with every word, and when I finished, he grabbed my hand. "We're leaving," he said. "We'll go somewhere else, start over. I've got savings. We can make it work." I pulled back, shaking my head. "I'm not running, Elliot. This is my home, too. I've spent my whole life fighting to exist here. I'm not giving that up because your dad's got a vendetta." He stared at me, his eyes searching mine. "Then we fight together," he said finally. "But you need to know something. He's not just coming for you. He's coming for anyone who stands with you, including me." The weight of his words settled over us like fog. I'd been so focused on my own survival that I hadn't realized how much Elliot was risking. His father wasn't just a politician. He was a man who'd built his empire on control, and Elliot was his heir. Defying him wasn't just rebellion. It was betrayal. The next morning, I found a note slipped under my door. It was in Elliot's handwriting, but the words were shaky, like he'd written it in a hurry. "Meet me at the diner on Route 12. Midnight. Don't tell anyone." My gut twisted. Something was wrong. I showed up early, the diner's neon sign buzzing in the dark. Elliot was already there, sitting in a booth, his face pale. "He knows," he said before I could sit down. "He's got proof, texts, photos, everything. He's giving me an ultimatum. Cut you off or lose everything." I felt like I'd been punched. "What did you tell him?" "I told him to go to hell," Elliot said, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. "But Eli, he's not stopping. He's talking about pressing charges, public indecency, anything he can pin on us. He's got the sheriff in his pocket." I leaned back, my mind racing. Crestwood wasn't just a town. It was a machine, and we were caught in its gears. But as I looked at Elliot, at the way he was fighting for us despite everything, I knew I couldn't let him face it alone. "Then we get smart," I said. "We find a way to fight back, on our terms." He nodded, a spark of hope in his eyes. But as we left the diner, hand in hand, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were running out of time. We needed allies, and we needed them fast. Crestwood wasn't all pitchforks and prejudice. There were people who'd stayed quiet but hadn't drunk the mayor's Kool-Aid. I reached out to Sarah, my coworker at the library, who'd been slipping me warnings about the board's plans. She met us at a coffee shop in the next town over, her eyes darting nervously as she slid into the booth. "I can't believe I'm doing this," she whispered, pushing a folder across the table. "These are emails from the board. They're planning to fire you, Eli, and they're pressuring other businesses to blackball you. The mayor's behind it all." Elliot's face hardened as he read through the papers. "He's not just targeting Eli. He's trying to erase anyone who doesn't fit his vision of Crestwood." Sarah nodded. "There's more. I heard him talking at a fundraiser. He's planning a town ordinance, some kind of family values law to crack down on public immorality. It's aimed at you too, but it'll hurt others too." I felt sick. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every kid in Crestwood who'd ever felt different, every person hiding who they were. "We need to stop him," I said. "Expose him before he can do this." Elliot looked at me, his eyes fierce. "We will. But we need proof, something he can't spin." We spent the next week digging. Elliot used his access to his father's office to copy files, financial records, emails, anything that might show the mayor's abuse of power. I reached out to old friends, people I hadn't spoken to since high school, who'd left Crestwood but still had ties to the town. One of them, a journalist named Mia who now worked for a Cleveland paper, agreed to help. "Send me what you've got," she said over the phone. "If it's solid, I'll run it." But the mayor was moving faster. One night, as we left the lighthouse, we were ambushed. Not by fists, but by cameras. A local blogger, known for stirring up trouble, had followed us. The next morning, the internet was flooded with photos. Me and Elliot, our faces clear, our hands intertwined. The captions were vicious, calling us everything from sinners to traitors. The comments were worse. Elliot's phone buzzed nonstop. Texts from his father, his sister, even his mother, who'd been silent through the whole ordeal. "He's cutting me off," Elliot said, his voice hollow as he stared at the screen. "No trust fund, no job, nothing." I grabbed his hand, my heart pounding. "You don't need his money. You've got me." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I know, Eli, but this isn't just about money. He's trying to break us." The pressure was suffocating. My job at the library was hanging by a thread, and Elliot was barely holding it together. But we kept fighting. Mia came through with a lead, an old campaign donor who'd fallen out with the mayor and was willing to talk. He claimed the mayor had been funneling city funds into his campaign, hiding it through shell companies. If we could prove it, it could bring him down. We met the donor, a grizzled man named Frank, at a bar outside town. He slid us a USB drive with bank records and emails. "Be careful," he warned. "Grayson's got eyes everywhere." That night, as we sat in my apartment poring over the files, Elliot's phone rang. It was his father. I could hear the mayor's voice through the speaker, cold and sharp. "You think you can ruin me, boy? You're nothing without me." Elliot hung up, his hands shaking. "He knows," he said. "He knows we're onto him." I pulled him close, my arms wrapping around him. "Then we move faster," I said. "We get this to Mia, and we end this." But even as I said it, I knew it wouldn't be that simple. The mayor wasn't just fighting for his reputation, he was fighting for control. And in Crestwood, control was everything. The article hit like a bomb. Mia's story, published in the Cleveland paper, laid it all bare. The mayor's embezzlement, his abuse of power, his campaign to vilify me to distract from his own crimes. The USB drive had been gold, bank records, emails, even a recorded phone call where the mayor threatened a council member who'd questioned his spending. Crestwood was in chaos. Protesters gathered outside City Hall, some demanding the mayor's resignation, others defending him with the same blind loyalty I'd seen at his rallies. But the victory felt hollow. The library fired me the day the article dropped, citing community concerns. My landlord gave me a week to move out, claiming too much trouble. And Elliot was a ghost of himself. His father had cut him off completely, and the town's venom had turned on him, too. Traitor was scrawled across his car in black paint, and he'd stopped going to his family's mansion after his mother told him he wasn't welcome. We moved into a cheap motel on the edge of town, pooling what little money we had. It was a far cry from the lighthouse, with its stained carpets and flickering lights, but it was ours. We sat on the lumpy bed, the USB drive between us like a grenade. "We did it," I said, trying to sound hopeful. He's finished. Elliot shook his head. He's not done, Eli. He's cornered, and that makes him dangerous. He was right. The next day, the mayor held a press conference, his face a mask of righteous fury. He denied everything, calling the article a smear campaign orchestrated by outsiders and deviants. He didn't name us, but he didn't have to. The crowd knew, and their cheers were a warning. That night, someone threw a brick through the motel window. It landed inches from where Elliot was sleeping, glass shattering across the floor. Scrawled on the brick in marker was a single word, "Leave." I pulled Elliot into my arms, his body trembling, and whispered, "We're okay, we're okay." But I wasn't sure I believed it. We couldn't stay in Crestwood, not like this. But running felt like giving up, and I'd promised myself I wouldn't. Elliot, though, was fraying at the edges. "Maybe we should go," he said one morning, his voice barely above a whisper. "Start over somewhere else. Somewhere we can just be." I wanted to say yes, to pack our bags and leave Crestwood's poison behind. But something in me wouldn't let go. This was my home, too, and I'd fought too hard to let the mayor win. "One more move," I said. "We take him down for good, and then we decide." Elliot nodded, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. We reached out to Mia again, who'd been getting threats of her own but wasn't backing down. She connected us with a lawyer in Cleveland, a woman named Carla who specialized in corruption cases. "You've got enough to bury him," she said, flipping through the files. "But you need to be ready for the fallout. He'll come for you both." She was right. The mayor's next move was personal. He filed a lawsuit against us, claiming defamation and emotional distress. It was a desperate play, but it tied us up in legal fees we couldn't afford. Worse, it kept the town's eyes on us, the headlines screaming our names. We were running out of time, money, and hope. But then, a crack of light. Sarah called, her voice shaking with excitement. "There's a protest tomorrow," she said. "Not for the mayor, for you. People are sick of his lies. They're meeting at the park." I didn't believe her until we showed up. There, in the same park where Elliot had kissed me that first night, were dozens of people. Kids I'd helped at the library, teachers, even a few churchgoers who'd stayed silent too long. They held signs, "Love is not a crime. Crestwood stands with Eli and Elliot." My throat tightened, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like we weren't alone. Elliot squeezed my hand, his eyes shining. "We're not done yet," he said, and in that moment I believed him. The protest was a turning point, but it wasn't the end. The mayor doubled down, calling the protesters radicals and vowing to restore order. But the town was fracturing. People were talking, questioning, waking up. The article had planted a seed, and the protest watered it. Crestwood wasn't his anymore. We met with Carla, the lawyer, in her Cleveland office, a sleek space that felt a world away from our motel room. She laid out our options. Fight the lawsuit, go public with our story, or settle and leave. "You've got the evidence to win," she said, "but it'll be ugly. He'll drag you through the mud." Elliot looked at me, his hand finding mine under the table. "We're not settling," he said. "He doesn't get to win." I nodded, my heart swelling with pride. This wasn't the Elliot I'd met months ago, hiding behind his father's shadow. This was a man ready to fight for us, for himself, for something bigger. We agreed to go public, to tell our story in our own words. Mia arranged an interview with a national outlet, one that couldn't be ignored. The day of the interview, we sat in a studio, lights hot on our faces. The reporter, a kind woman named Lena, asked us about everything, the mayor's campaign, the photos, the threats. I told her about the brick, the paint, the job I'd lost. Elliot talked about his father, about the weight of a name he no longer wanted. And then, holding my hand, he said, "I love Eli, and I'm not ashamed of it. I'm ashamed of the man who raised me to think I should be." The interview aired that night, and the world shifted again. Calls poured in, support from strangers, hate from others, but mostly people who'd been silent too long. A petition started, demanding the mayor's resignation. The city council, smelling blood, opened an investigation into his finances. Crestwood was no longer a monolith. It was a battleground, and we were at the center. The mayor's lawsuit collapsed under the weight of new evidence. More whistleblowers came forward, emboldened by our story. By the end of the month, he resigned, his legacy in tatters. The town didn't magically become a haven, but it was changing. People stopped averting their eyes when I walked by. Some even smiled. Elliot and I moved to Cleveland not because we were running, but because we were ready for something new. We found a small apartment, nothing fancy, but it was ours. I got a job at a community center helping kids like the one I used to be. Elliot started painting again, something he hadn't done since high school, his canvases filled with colors that felt like hope. One night, as we sat on our tiny balcony overlooking the city, Elliot handed me his old notebook. Inside was a new sketch, a lighthouse, waves crashing around it, two figures standing at the top, hands entwined. Below it, he'd written, "We made it." I looked at him, at the man who'd risked everything to stand by me, and felt a peace I'd never known. Crestwood had tried to break us, but it had only made us stronger. We weren't just survivors. We were builders, creating a life where love wasn't a shame, but a triumph. And as the city lights twinkled below, I knew we'd keep fighting. Not just for us, but for everyone who'd ever been told they didn't belong. Because love, in all its messy, beautiful forms, was worth it.